מכתם לדוד, שומרני אל כי חסיסית בך. אמרת לאדוני, אדוני אתה, טובתי בא עליך, לקדושים אשר בארץ אימה, ואדירי כל חפצי בם. ירבו עצמותם אחר מהרו, בנסיך נזכה מדם, ובא לצית שמותם על שפתי. אדוני מנס חלקי וכוסי, עתו תמיר גורלי. חבלים נפלו לי בנעימים, אף נחלת שפרה עלי. אברך את אדוני אשר יעצני, אף לילות יסרוני כליותי. שיוויתי אדוני לנגדי תמיד, כי מימיני בא למות. לכן שמח ליבי ויגל כבודי, אף שרי ישכון לבטח. כי לא תעזוב נפשי לשאול, לא תיתן חסידיך לראות שוחט. תודיעני אורח חיים, סוב השמחות את פניך נעימות בימינך נצח. To read it in English, we'll ask from your grandson, Eunice Lincoff, to come up and to lead us in this chapter in English. And the next chapter, 23rd, we'll ask from Jacob to come up.
Guard me, God, for in you I have taken refuge. You have said to the Lord, you are my Lord. I have no good beyond you. As for the holy ones who are in the earth and the mighty in whom all my desire, their sorrows will multiply. Those that run to other gods, their blood libations will I not pour out, nor take their names upon my lips. The Lord is my allotted portion and my share. You sustain my fate. Portions have fallen to me in pleasant places. Lovely indeed is my estate. I will bless the Lord, who has given me counsel. My conscience admonishes me at night. I have set the Lord before me always. Before God is at my right hand, I shall not falter. Therefore my heart rejoices, and my entire body exults, although my body will rest secure. For you will not abandon me to the grave, nor will you let your devout one see destruction. You will make known to me the path of life. In your presence and fullness of joy, there is delight at your right hand for eternity.
Now we'll do chapter 23 in Hebrew, then in English. מזמור לדוד, אדוני רואי לא אחסר, בנות דשר ירביצני, על מי מנוחות ינעלני. נפשי ישובב ינחני במעגלי צדק למען שמו, גם כי אלך בגיא צל מוות לא ירא רע, כי אתה עמדי. שבטך ומשענתך ימי נחמוני, תערוך לפני שולחן נגד צורריי. דשנת בשמן ראשי כוסי רוויה, אך טוב החסד ירדפוני כל ימי חיי, ושבתי בבית אדוני לאורך ימים.
A song of David. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not lack. God causes me to lie down in lush pastures. God leads me besides tranquil waters. God restores my soul and guides me in righteous paths for God's name's sake. Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your scepter and staff, they comfort me. You prepared a table before me in full view of my adversaries. You have anointed my head with oil, my cup overflows. May only goodness and kindness pursue me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord for the length of days.
Thank you. We are saying goodbye today to Eunice Lincoff. First of all, I want to offer condolences to your brothers, Barry and Ken Cohen, to your sister Cynthia, to your daughter Jane Hefner, and to Michael, Debbie, and Mark Lincoff, your grandchildren, Gabrielle in Issachar, Jerusalem, Aaron Ariella and Jacob Lincoff, and the most important, Aharon Chaviv, the great-grandchild, Kolev, Jerusalem. Before I start, I want to tell you, Michael, I have to deliver a message from my mother. 17 years ago, when your father passed away, you used to go, at that time we did not have a minyan in Son Chabad, you used to go every morning to Bichut Kehillah. And once you told me that on the way from Bichut Kehillah to the hospital, to the clinic, you call your mother in the morning. And I thought it's a very good idea because it's a very set time. You're in the car, you cannot do anything else. Because if you try to do things like this, you try to call, I always try to call my mother and I never worked out, it's too late, it's too early, the changes of hours from Israel to here. Then I started to adopt this custom. I didn't do it every day as good as you are, but I did it very often. Then Friday, I told my mother, told her, she knows you from other stories that you helped my father. I told her that your mother passed away, and I told her that the phone calls that she gets is because of you. Then she asked me to thank you for it. Then you see, you honoring your mother inspired me to honor my mother. We lead by example. Your mother's Hebrew name is Eunice Lincoff. And as I mentioned that always, the name, as Kabbalah tells us, is a prophecy from the parents and says a lot about the person. Your mother was born 82 years ago in Wheeling, West Virginia. And at the age of 25, when she married your father, Morton Lincoff, she moved to Steubenville, Ohio. At that time, your father owned a jewelry business, jewelry shop. And she, in the beginning, she didn't help in the store, but she got involved in school. She was in the Board of Education. She wrote a column about the school in the newspaper. Steubenville, Ohio benefited from your mother's moving to the city. Then in 1975, when your father and your mother opened together their own jewelry store, it's called the Lincoff Jewelry. Then she was involved in the store. She was the brains behind the store. She was running the whole thing behind the scenes. And she developed it, and she worked. Everything was much better because of her. But really, I think when your personality started to shine even more, when your father retired from the store, both of them got involved in the temple. Your father became the president of the temple in Steubenville, and he was for 7 years the president. Why was he for 7 years? Not only because nobody else wanted to do it, because when you do a good job, we give you the honor to do it more. In Pirkei Avot it's written, mitzvah goreret mitzvah. One mitzvah brings to another. Even more, it's written, schar mitzvah mitzvah. When you do, what's the reward for a mitzvah? That God gives you the opportunity to do it more. Then because he did a good job, God gave him the opportunity to do more and more and more. At the same time, your mother, at one point, she was the head of the president of the sisterhood. Basically, together, they were running the temple. Reminds me of something very close to me. Like me and Miriam, your father and your mother run the whole show. Later, after your father passed away, she at one point became the president of the temple. And the Jewish community in Steubenville was constantly shrinking. I remember when I came to your father's funeral, and I was at your parents' house, and I saw right away, it was just sad to see how you can see where it's going. And your mother was fighting to keep the temple alive, to keep the temple open. Even everybody else said, oh, there is no chance, and we don't have enough members, we don't have enough money. She wrote at one point, as Mark told me, she will not be able to face Morton, your husband, if she will not put up a good fight before we close down the temple. And she held it for many, many years. She kept it open. And even when they closed it, she made sure it will go to a community thing, will not be sold. And then they were having services, they're doing good holidays. And when they finally closed the temple, because there was nobody there, she made sure that the Torah would be donated to other synagogues. She wanted to donate the Torah to our synagogue, I remember at one point. And the other books, she made it in the most dignified and respectful way. The name is Yehudit Liba. Yehudit means Yehudi, Jews, Judaism, and Liba means love. The love of Judaism was expressed by her very much through her dedication to the temple. And they went to a lot of, in the name of the temple, they went to a lot of national conventions. They were very, very involved. In their way, they cared very much for Judaism in their city. But not only, her love was not expressed only in Jewish things. She at one point, then after your father retired, she developed a program, created a government program that is helping for children from the age of 0 till the age of 5. These kids, until they come to children who are born to underprivileged families, till they come to kindergarten, it might be too late to help them. But they need food, they need education, they need to learn how to read, and so on and on. She created a whole organization, was funded by the government, and with people who work, employees underneath her. She was involved for 10 years in this organization, and she touched countless lives that will later become adult and contribute to the world. This is love to people that you don't know, you'll never meet. They'll never say thank you to you. It's a real dedication just to improve the world, just to make a better world. I met your mother many times, and had with her long conversations. Very, very intelligent woman. It was always a pleasure to talk to her. And what impressed me about her more than everything, that she not only accepted, but she was excited about the choice of way of a religious life that you chose and with your family. Even it wasn't exactly the way she grew up Reform, but she was open-minded, appreciated, very proud of your involvement, of your leading services and other things, and the way your children are raised, and now your grandchildren. I met her at Gabriel's wedding and Aaron's wedding, and I talked to her at that time. And I saw the joy that she had and the pride of how the grandchildren came out. And that says a lot about a person, how he handles things that not exactly his way, but not only is not discouraging it, is encouraging it and excited about it. She went to Israel with you, and Gabriel, I think, was there. And going to Israel is not exactly a friendly place for people who have to go with a cane or things like this, especially in Jerusalem with the steps up, steps down. And she went and she slept everywhere, and she saw everything. And as yesterday Gabriel told me, she was on the cable car to go to Metzada. She was so inspired. She was moved to tears by the beauty of the country, because she was loving Jews and Judaism, because that's who she was. Her name says it all. It was very important to her. And therefore, somebody who cares for a temple, wherever it is, most of the people pay their dues, say good Shabbos, and leave. People who care, this is the very few in every city. It's written about Abraham before he passed, the Torah says that Abraham was old. But the way the Torah is using the word is Baba Yamim. The literal translation for Baba Yamim is, he came with his days. It's a strange word. What means he came with his days? The Rebbe used to explain it many times. You look back, and on every day you can say that was a day. This day was well spent. It was useful. It was meaningless. It wasn't It was a meaningful day. It wasn't a meaningless day. It was something that was. I'm happy. I'm glad that I used this day in this way. Your mother, she lived 82 years. She came with her days. She accomplished a lot. Every day was accomplished. Every day was accounted for. She was a Baha Bayamim. And the world, when she leaves the world, she leaves it a much better place than when she came in. Tehi nishmata tzrura b'tzror chaim. And now we'll hear from Michael and from Mark and from the grandchildren, Gabriel, Aaron, and Jacob, and then from the brothers, Barry and Ken.
One evening in 2003, when I was 43 years old, I sat in a restaurant with my wife and 3 children, and we celebrated my mother's being awarded a master's degree in strategic leadership from a university in West Virginia. She was nearly 70 years old on that day. This accomplishment and the timing of it during the course of her lifetime was emblematic of this woman whose keen intellect, determination, and her resolute sense of social responsibility made her the strength in the core of her family and a force for real good in her community throughout her life. My mother was in many ways, by her own description, born before her time. Frequently unconventional and outspoken, she was never apologetic for that. She was a feminist without the militancy or stridence, and in a later generation she would have almost certainly been a political leader or a lawyer. She was the oldest of 5 children, born in Wheeling, and there was never any doubt with those who knew her that she was an oldest child. She left college after only 2 years so that her family's modest resources could instead be used for her sister to attend nursing school. And she defied the convention of that era for unmarried young women and moved out alone to manage an office in Florida for several years. She then settled down at age 25 to marry my father and moved to Steubenville. When my brother and I were young, before she joined the jewelry store in our teens, she was a stay-at-home mom, kind of. She was elected to the Steubenville Board of Education, but didn't just attend board meetings like the other members. She actually visited all of the schools, she talked with the educators, she learned about their methods and challenges, and she really became a devoted advocate of the public school system. She decided the schools would actually be best served if the community had a better sense of what was going on and what they were doing. So she convinced a local newspaper to run a weekly column that she authored for several years entitled About Our Schools. You know, while some kids go to school and they're obliged to follow in the footsteps of an older sibling, my brother and I, we were living up to our mother's reputation among the teachers and administrators. After her retirement, she reinvented herself, and particularly after my father passed away 17 years ago, she turned her energies and her formidable abilities to social service. She was a hardcore liberal, old school, but in the good sense, in the sense of the fundamental premise of fairness, and that those who are fortunate have a societal responsibility to those who are not. Throughout her life, she read voluminously. She gained an incisive understanding of history and of current issues, and she vigorously supported women's rights, child services, and non-discrimination throughout her life. Her work later in life enabled her to actually begin making real differences in her community. She went back to college, and she earned her bachelor's degree. She was hired by an organization known as the Jefferson County Community Action Council, and there she conceived of, created, and directed an entire county-wide program for early childhood development. She wrote and secured large government grants to support early Head Start intervention and other childhood programs for disadvantaged families. And along the way, she earned that master's degree that I spoke of earlier. Other community organizations recognized her energy and her effectiveness, that when Eunice Lincoff took on a project, it got done, and it got done right. So over the years, she served as the president of our synagogue in Steubenville during this time of particular financial crisis. She led the Family Service Agency, an academy of lifelong learning. She brought to her community the Big Brother, Big Sister chapter, and even up to the end of her life, she was the president of the County Library Board. So professional accomplishments notwithstanding, Eunice Lincoff was foremost a wife and a mother. For her family, she melded together a combination of unconditional love and acceptance with true wisdom that supported and guided us through the different phases of our lives. I always considered her the brains of the operation. She knew, for example, how important it was to instill her love of reading into her kids. From the time we were only a few years old, we visited the public library to read or borrow books 2 or 3 times a week. I recall wandering around the halls and the basement and the attic of this old castle-like building, literally for hours at a time. How many children see their library or recall their library as a playroom? An exceptional writer herself, she insisted that my brother and I work to become facile at composition and writing. No matter what your career, she would say, you won't be successful if you can't communicate. I now find myself channeling Eunice Lincoff in the same way when I counsel the medical students and the residents. She had the insight and the foresight to understand how and when to make opportunities for us. Over the objections of my somewhat overprotective and athletically disinclined father, she sent us to overnight summer camp, had me climbing auditorium catwalks and scaffolding as a lighting technician for her local theater group, and encouraged me to run track. As my interest in science and medicine emerged in elementary and junior high school, she introduced me to high school chemistry and biology teachers that she knew from her school board days. And they actually became my mentors for years after that. And she was practical and no nonsense. To this day, a few times a month, A patient or one of my colleagues will remark how quickly I touch type into the electronic medical record on the computer. And I always respond that it's because my mother enrolled me, the only college prep and the only male boy, in a high school vocational typing class, because she didn't think I should have to pay someone to type my term papers when I was in college. I cherish the memory of the long conversations my mother and I had throughout my life, often well into the night, as she helped me work through my problems or frustrations in a singularly calm and pragmatic manner. Or when she challenged me, even as an adult, to expand my perspectives, improve my understanding, or re-examine my opinions. With her wisdom, this was tempered by unconditional acceptance. Her influence on my wife and children has been equally special and profound. She strove to be the model of the ideal mother-in-law to Debbie, and she loved and respected her absolutely. Her grandchildren invigorated her life, and she delighted in the opportunities to help cultivate their talents and shape their character. She saw in her granddaughter Gabrielle the ultimate expression of their shared passion for public service, and she reveled in the thoughtful interests and the accomplishments of her grandsons Aaron and Jacob. I'm very grateful for all of you who came here today. Your presence truly respects my mother's life and her memory, and it honors the example she set of a life well lived. The example of a steadfast wife for 40 years who raised 2 sons with love and compassion and purpose, of turning from grief over her husband's passing to her own professional fulfillment and meaningful contributions to her community, of a life of quiet dignity without pretense, content with her family and friends, in her home with her dogs, without complaint or self-pity, even with arthritis and limited mobility and the gradual loss of friends contracted her world, and of the respected and loving confidant who will be profoundly missed by her children and grandchildren throughout their lives. Thank you. For those of you who don't know, I'd like to introduce my brother, Mark Lincoff.
I'm not quite as eloquent, but I think what I always used to say about my mother to everybody, because I always talked about my mother, I always said she's not only easy to love and easy to like, she's easy to be proud of. She's interesting. There's a lot in there. Michael mentioned her sharp intellect. She was extremely opinionated, extremely informed in her opinions. You didn't want to get into an intellectual argument with her unless you had your big boy pants on, because you're going to get slaughtered. And sometimes it was really fun to just sit back and watch. What a lot of people didn't know about her, during those somewhat idle stay-at-home mom years, she expressed a creative side, a talented side. There were a lot of things she could do that she never thought she was any good at, but she did them anyway, and everybody else went, this is amazing. She could paint. She could do paintings. She could look at a photograph or something and turn it into an oil painting. And she did beautiful work, and it was hanging all over her house the entire time I was growing up, and I have some of them now, and Michael has some of them, and there's still some of them hanging in the house. And then many years later, she learned how to do needlepoint, but not just one stitch like most people do. She made beautiful needlepoints that looked like something out of I don't know what. And she always had needlework in her hands, no matter where we were. But what I admired the most was the attention to the theater group in Steubenville, Ohio. Way back in the early 60s, I'm not exactly sure what year, and it was before women did things like this. She helped found a local theater group, the Steubenville Players, and she assistant directed the first production and became one of their most prolific directors. And as a matter of fact, she was the first woman to do a musical. Most of the productions that they did that were really good ones, the ones that people talked about and said, that was really good work, they were the ones that she did. So I guess she was sort of an old lady in body only. And there was no doubt, I used to notice it because I would see her only twice a year. I used to notice that she was getting older, but it was only here. It wasn't up here. And maybe that's why it's so hard for me to wrap my mind around the fact that she's gone, because she never seemed to get old enough to die. Michael mentioned her acceptance and her openness and her curiosity about everything. Very much an understatement. She was very interested in who everybody was and what everybody did and everybody's value and everybody's place in the world. And she was also very capable of having a rollicking good time. She had a couple of friends who helped her express that side, one of which was her dear friend Nan Watsman. And let's just say that if anybody had ever told me that I would be bar hopping down Duval Street on Key West with my mother and her best friend, I would think they were crazy, but it happened. So I guess you could say I found a friend in the mother later on. That's what we were primarily. She never hesitated to be my mother. She never hesitated to tell me when I needed to listen to her and to make her feelings known, because she was always mother. But we could talk about anything, and she was one of my best friends. I know that probably sounds a little dysfunctional and soft, but it's the way I'm going to think about her, and it's what I'm going to miss the most. Someday I'll pick it back up again. So, anyway, thank you.
Thanks everybody for coming. I think the three of us just wanted to say some of our thoughts, what Grandma meant to us. I wasn't going to mention it, but Uncle Mark mentioned, I'm glad he did. I started when we were younger, and speaking, my grandma was this artist, and I remember these paintings on the walls in her house, and I just assumed it was like some fine art that I didn't know the artist of. And I only remember like later in life I asked somebody, it was like, because I saw our name on it, Lincoff, and I was like, wait, that's our name, so who actually painted this? And yeah, my grandma was like, yeah, I painted those. I was like, how is this not something you're like doing and like selling? And this is not, because these are just amazing paintings that I could never, imagine doing myself or anybody I know having that kind of skill. And it was just something that she just learned how to do, did really well, and then just moved on to something else. And that was just an amazing story. So because Mark brought that up, I wanted to talk about that. But what I want to talk about, I was trying to think about what I wanted to, talk about with my grandmother, and I kind of boiled it down to there's three things I tend to think about, or when I first think about my grandma, what comes to my mind, and they're kind of unconventional, but the first thing is raisin cookies. And it sounds a little odd, but there is these raisin cookies that were unbelievable. And first time I had them was at my grandmother's. That's the only time I've ever had them. And I didn't realize until later in life that my grandmother had to go to Pittsburgh, which was 45 minutes away, to get these raisin cookies that we love so much. And every time we would come in, she would beforehand make sure that there was time set out to go to Pittsburgh, go to this one bakery in this random spot in Pittsburgh, and pick up these raisin cookies that we love so much and drive back. Whether it's snowing or raining or whatever's going on, if she couldn't do it, she'd make sure there's someone organized that could do it. We were so obsessed with these cookies, and the type of person that she was, we would always go there for Yom Kippur, and when I was younger, I tried so hard to fast, but these raisin cookies were there. And I would look at the box, because she always had them in the same spot. She definitely should have switched up the spot now that I'm thinking about it. And I never could help myself, and I would go over there and grab a raisin cookie. I thought it was really sneaky. But she always saw me. And I remember one time we actually made eye contact when I got into the cookies. And we made that eye contact, and there was this understanding, like, I know what's going on here. I'm going to let it go, because she knew it was important. So with raisin cookies, Grandma taught me the importance of family and really going out of your way for family, for something as small as raisin cookies. The other thing I think about is another food, no surprise, eggs. I would come to my grandmother's alone. When Jacob was old enough, he would come with me, but my grandmother very quickly realized I had an interest in cooking, and she helped flourish this interest. And she bought me a guide that we'd watch on how to cook, little techniques. And I remember the one thing we really focused on was how to make a good egg. And I didn't realize how many techniques there were, and you had to heat up the pan to a certain point, and the oil has to go to a certain point. There's all these things we need to do. So after we watched the video, we went to the kitchen and started trying this out. We ruined so many so many eggs, until we finally got it. And from then on, Grandma would always ask me, even till the end, she would ask me, how's the cooking going? How's the eggs doing? You still making good eggs? Are you putting it in at the right time? So something like eggs, Grandma really imparted to me the importance in caring about other people and their interests, even though Grandma never really cared too much. Cooking wasn't necessarily a big thing to her, but she knew it was something that mattered to me, and she took the time to help flourish that and asked me throughout my whole life, how's the eggs doing? So she taught me the importance of really caring about other people's interests and opinions and feelings, especially family. And the last thing is dogs, is what I think about, and that's something I think a lot of people think about, because Grandma always had dogs, and at the end she had 3 dogs, as most she's ever had. I never had a dog growing up, as much as I wanted them, but where my love came from, where I have this deep love now for dogs and animals, came from my grandmother. She had these dogs, and she realized very quickly that I had this, caring for dogs, and so she made sure I took an interest in raising her dog, and she would call me and we would talk about what food we're going to give the dog, and how do you play tug of war with it correctly so you're teaching it the right things. And I remember when her first dog died, it struck me, I was very young, it struck me is the pain that she felt, and it was as if she lost a child. So when the next dog came, Shayna, and I grew up with that dog, and that dog died, I was the one that Grandma and I came together and cried over this dog as if we both just lost a child, and that was something that we had this bond that no one else really had with her, and that was something I took. So, for something like dogs, Grandma taught me compassion and, caring about something, animals, people, compassion in general, that you can have that type of feelings for something like a dog that you would for a child, and that's what I took home with me. So I just I don't have a whole speech written out, I don't have like an ending for this, and Jacob wants to talk, but I just want to talk about, what Grandma meant to me, these little things, but how it formed who I am now from this amazing woman. So thanks.
So I guess sort of continuing with the non-traditional things that we sort of remember about this incredible woman, the first thing that comes to my mind these days when I do think of my grandmother is actually Game of Thrones. For those of you who don't know, it's a show that's all about violence, sex, political intrigue, and I would watch it with my new episode with my close friends, all 23, 24, and then I'd call my grandmother. And we would spend an hour, 2 hours discussing it, delving into the episodes. Really, this was something we shared. We both loved this show. Now, in retrospect, I don't actually know whether she loved this show or whether she just loved me. But either way, this was definitely something we shared and something we discussed quite a bit. And it was just this incredible woman who, this was a show that's targeted toward the 18 to 49 demographic. And I discussed it with my 80-year-old grandmother. And between seasons, we would discuss and go back and forth. And it was, she was totally there. None of it fazed her. She was not someone who was fazed by blood or sex or any of that. It was just, she could handle all of it and loved to just sit and talk. And we would go on for a while. It was a part of my life, part of our life, something that we were interested, that she also chose to be interested in. And it was very meaningful that something that we could share and just casually talk. That our relationship could be much more than just grandmother, grandson, that it could also be casual and fun and that we could have these shared interests. So if Game of Thrones represented one half of my relationship with her, sort of her willingness to connect with us on any level, the other half was how she helped me formulate my personal ideologies. So as has been mentioned, this was a very liberal woman who had very intense beliefs. Especially lately, after the financial crisis, she believed in increased regulation and financial reform. And then there was me, who was studying at the Wharton School of Finance and Commerce, about to accept a job in finance. Suffice to say, there was probably some differences in opinion between my professors and her. But we would discuss these differences constantly, and that was the best part, is that they were discussions. My grandmother was intensely opinionated, as has been said, but she didn't speak at you. She would discuss with you. She would challenge your beliefs, but wouldn't dismiss them. She was intensely educated, intensely informed, and as was said, if you were going to have a conversation with her, you better come prepared. But in the process of having those debates, having those conversations, it forced me to formulate my own opinions. I couldn't just decide this is what I believed in. I had to know it. I had to have the support. I had to do the research. I had to know why this was what I believed in. And those debates, those discussions really helped me formulate my own political ideologies. I don't necessarily agree with her on everything that she believed, but it did fundamentally change what I believed and why I believed it. So much of who she was and what she did, it played a profound role in shaping who I am now and what I believe now. And I could never thank her enough for that.
In addition to my parents, my grandmother was one of the single greatest influences on my life. You've heard by now how she dedicated her career and much of her personal life to social justice advocacy and community building. What you did not hear is that when I would visit her, starting from a very early age, she would take me to those board meetings. I would witness firsthand as my grandmother continuously worked to advance the conditions of low-income and disadvantaged families in Steubenville, and on a structural level, what it meant to be a community organizer and how formalities of nonprofit boards worked. Directly from observing my grandmother, I began to learn about the vital nature of public interest work and how to be an effective and passionate leader, as well as an equal. I certainly loved watching her demand equality from her male peers in every context. It's so easy to connect these early childhood experiences orchestrated by my grandmother to my life today. Throughout my educational, professional, and personal experiences and interests, I've been consistently dedicated to and passionate about public interest, specifically in advocacy for underserved and vulnerable populations. This purpose of mine, this purpose that gives me so much joy and accomplishment, is directly because of my grandmother. But perhaps what I will miss most about my grandmother was her truly limitless love for those she cared about. I felt her love every single day. One of her expressions of this love was her visits to me when I lived in DC. Although at the time she was in her very late 70s, on 3 separate occasions, my grandmother got her little self on a plane and visited me and stayed in my very tiny, very lousy DC apartment. In true full circle fashion, I was now the one who took her to my activities, in particular my law school classes. I'll never forget how she would sit up the night before on my torn and tattered temporary couch, reading assigned homework in my law school textbooks so that she could be prepared for the next day's lectures. Needless to say, my professors loved her annual visits. In addition to never forgetting a birthday, anniversary, or holiday, my grandmother would constantly send me things just because she knew they would be meaningful or helpful to me. Over the years, I grew to assume that if I received a particularly thoughtful or timely, relevant gift in an unmarked Amazon box, it was from her. In fact, only a month or 2 ago, I called my grandmother excitedly to tell her about my first experience volunteering with the Cleveland Homeless Legal Aid Program. I called her on a Wednesday night and explained to her that going forward, I would be volunteering once a month and that I really enjoyed the program. My only concern was that the homeless shelter wasn't in the best part of town, and I had felt a little uncomfortable walking from the shelter to my car. The very next day, when I got home from work, there was an Amazon package waiting for me. My night owl grandmother had stayed up all night researching and sent me a smart whistle, an incredible little piece of technology that connects to your phone via Bluetooth and if pressed activates emergency texts or emergency calls. She included a note this time. It read, "For you to stay safe on your solo evening adventures. I'm so proud of you. All my love, Grandma." She had overnighted me this item, even though I had explained to her that I wasn't due to volunteer in over a month, another full month. I'm not the only one who felt this affected by, this close to, and this strongly about my grandmother. As I look around this room, I'm particularly moved that all 7 of her nieces and nephews were able to come in today. Some came from as far as Oklahoma, Seattle, and San Francisco. I know they had similar connections and a similar love that I did for her. On an even larger level, I think about the influence and effect she had on her many clients over the years, and of course, her friends and the greater Steubenville community. She touched so many people. How lucky I was, how lucky we all were to have had her in our lives.
I'm Barry Cohen. I'm Eunice's brother, the oldest of two. I will try hard not to repeat anything that's already been said and just offer a couple of personal thoughts that I've had while sitting there and driving up in the car from where we live with my brother. For whatever reason, growing up with Eunice, who was 6 years older than I, we kind of hit it off. Our personalities kind of meshed, and she always took a bit of a special interest in me. When she moved away from home after graduating high school and attending college for about a year and a half, she, as you may have heard, she went to Florida, to Orlando, for a short period of time. And somehow she talked my mother and father one summer into putting me on a Greyhound bus in Wheeling, West Virginia. I was 14 or so, got on this Greyhound bus, transferred buses in Atlanta, Georgia, and went to Orlando to visit her for about a month. And today I'm thinking, what mother and father would do that to a 14-year-old, allow that to happen? But she conned him into doing that, and spent a delightful month with her and then made the trip home. A couple of years later, she returned home to Wheeling, where she subsequently met Mort, her husband, and got married. But prior to that, Eunice is the one who taught me how to drive in her newly purchased, very used 1949 Dodge, which worked out well until someone came around a corner in one of the hilly sections of rural West Virginia and took the left front fender off the car. No one was hurt, but she did that for me. She wanted me to learn how to drive. Then later in life, after Mort passed away, I was living close enough, my brother and sister were not, that I could go visit her on a monthly basis or so, where she had a honey-do list for me, and we would sit in the family room and talk. Well, mostly she talked, I listened. As has been said, she was a woman of strong opinions and was not reticent at all about expressing them. And each time I would finally have to leave, she would walk me to the door and give me a great big hug and say, "Oh, I enjoyed it so much." Coming up in the car just now, I was talking with my brother Ken about our different relationship with her. And it was kind of a puzzle that he couldn't understand why we had this special relationship. And I offered up the opinion that because he's too much like her, and they kind of butted heads in that regard. But it occurred to me that the reason she enjoyed the visit so much, one of the reasons was, I sat and listened and offered an occasional comment or occasional observation, but we didn't really butt heads on it. I was smart enough, one of my few things I'm smart enough about, not to argue with Eunice because she had those strong opinions. And that's why she enjoyed the visits. So those are just, again, Aaron, three things that pop into my mind on a personal level. a great lady. Thank you.
That's amazing I made that. I'm big into tripping and falling these days. Our little Cohen clan, the 5 of us, has got a whole lot smaller. It started with our younger sister, Marjorie Jean Cohen, who was up here in Cleveland and who passed away about a decade ago. And now to the oldest, she was the youngest, and now to the oldest with Eunice. You know, there's 3 words, it doesn't matter. Those are 3 words that we hear a lot as we're going older from our kids. That don't worry, Dad, it doesn't matter. Don't worry, Ken, it doesn't matter. And as our lives dim, this is perhaps correct. Perhaps it really doesn't matter so much anymore. But we all knew we could call Eunice and talk with her about our joys or worries, and she never said that dreaded phrase, it doesn't matter. She was interested. She was our queen. She wanted to hear from her subjects. And we were all that. Don't make any mistakes about that. But no matter what we thought, to her, it mattered. And we needed that. We wanted her approval. It made us feel better. She was the nexus of the entire family. And she's going to be missed for that. Everything sort of flowed through her. We communicated by Eunice. And now, I'm afraid that we're all going to kind of drift apart. That's my concern. There's a lot of cousins back in this room who all communicated up to Eunice and then back out again. And I think my concern is the internet be damned that they're going to drift apart. But because life is busy and full of all that stuff, families tend to do that these days. But she was the center, its hub. And for us, for the last of us, we know it matters. We have lost our last best voice in Eunice. And to keep us together, to validate us, and to tell us it matters. Thank you.
For the memorial service, we'll ask from a brother-in-law of Michael and Debbie Lincoff, Brian Lead, to lead us with the memorial service. Please rise.
El Mole Rachamim, Shochen Bamromim, Hamatzei Menucha Nechana al Kanfei HaShechina, B'mahalot Krashim Utarim, Kizhar Harakia Hamazirin, Es Nishmas, Yehudit Liba, Bat Raphael Yitzchak, Shehalcha Le'olamo, Bavor, Shenadvu Tzedakabad Hazakaras Nishmaso, Began Eden Teye Menuchaso, Lochen al Harachamin, Yastirei Habeseter, Kenafav Le'olamim, V'yitzror b'yitzror ha'chaim esh nismaso, Adonai hu nachlaso, Usanuach ha'mishkavo v'sholom, B'namar, Amen. O God, full of compassion, who dwells on high, grant true rest upon the wings of the Shekhinah, the divine presence, in the exalted spheres of the holy and pure, who shine as the resplendence of the firmament to the soul of Eunice Lincoff, who is gone to her eternal home, for charity has been donated in remembrance of her soul. May her place of rest be in Gan Eden. Therefore may the all-merciful One shelter her with the cover of his wings forever, and bind her soul in the bond of life. The Lord is her portion. May she rest in her resting place in peace. And let us say, Amen.
You may be seated. The service will now continue to Pittsburgh, the Beth Israel Cemetery in Pittsburgh. From there, the family will go to Steubenville, to the house, to their mother's at Eunice's house to see Shiva today. Tomorrow, from tomorrow until Friday, the family will see Shiva, the resident of Michael and Debbie Lincoff, on 35958 Solon Road in Bentonville, Ohio. The services will be in the morning 7 a.m. and in the evening 8 p.m. from Monday to Friday.